Everyone's having a wonderful day. I am joining you today here from Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio is allotted 5 really nice days a year, and we're having one of them. So I've got a smile on my face. Hope you do as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get start talking about design trends and technology trends. So this talk is called 5+4. Because I've been looking at trends for a number of years. Kistler does explore trends and has for a number of years. And the 5 that I'm seeing right now, I've broken down into taller, the retirement of oil rub bronze, softening and glamorizing, alternate placement, and then a collection of colors that I want to bring to your attention. And then within the technology change, we're going to talk about new shapes. We're going to talk about LED and color. We will talk about how to use LED effectively because it's becoming more and more important. And then I'll share with you some information that helps us understand the very real inevitability that LED is going to be with us from this point forward. So with that, let's just jump right into the design trends. I told you what those were. And I'll just start with the first one. So the first group is called taller, and just a kind of a combination of things. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. For the most part, new construction ceiling heights have reached a minimum at this point of 9 foot. If you look at builders' reviews of customers and customer desires, customers are saying that they do not want 8-foot ceilings. They want at least a 9-foot ceiling in new homes, and many are going all the way up to 12 and even beyond that. Because of that, because our interior walls are shorter, the little 8 to 12-inch wall sconces that we have been using for virtually my entire career in lighting really don't look good in those spaces. They look undersized, and because of that, tall pieces are required. So if you take a look at this little collection here, you know this guy on the left is about 23 inches. The one in the middle is somewhere around 26 inches, and this one on the end is over 30 inches tall. Here, these are kind of the average size pieces, and those are coming in at somewhere around 15 to 18 inches as the kind of norm height, if you will. With a taller interior ceiling heights, an interesting thing happens. The exterior of the building also grows. So if you add 2 feet per floor to the inside, so you have 10-foot ceilings on the first floor, 10-foot ceilings on the second floor, you've now grown the exterior elevation of that home an additional 4 feet. And the same thing is happening now with the exteriors. Those sizes that had previously been considered correct no longer work. Add to that urban infill architecture, multi-story townhouses, and you now need taller exterior lighting. So if you look at these pieces here, you can see that these are substantially taller. If this guy were introduced maybe 5 years ago, it probably would have been cut off right around where my arrow is kind of flashing across the bottom. Same thing with this guy. It would be cut off around that point. The new designs are simply stretched out farther. In addition, to take care of those multi-story designs, you see these absolutely narrower pieces and even farther and taller stretched designs. Leaning a little bit more contemporary than we have seen in the past because of the new architecture. So you need those tall outdoor fixtures, as you see here. With urban infill architecture, and if you take a look at this piece of architecture here, very contemporary, but you can see that the width of this house, or this townhouse, is about a garage door and a half wide. So this is not a very wide home, but it is in fact 4 stories tall, and you can see that it is relatively deep. So this is a completely different design, and with this urban infill, you have to consider lighting in a slightly different way. You need to start looking at these lighting products that are going to be narrower and they're going to be taller. So these are almost 2-for-1. So this height is about twice the height of the width on this kind of mission pendant over here on the left. This is about 1.5 to 2 times on the other ones. This one is even taller than 1/2 of the diameter of the piece. So you need these taller pieces to fill all that vertical space, especially in these urban infill and townhouse designs where there are multi-stories that are visible. You absolutely need these taller pieces to fill that vertical space. So you need to look at that. Plus, you need to look at just basically foyers in new construction. Some of these foyers that are taller need to have taller pieces installed in them. And of course, that urban infill architecture needs a narrower piece and substantially taller as well. Okay, let's go on to the next subject. And before I do that, I want you to take a look at this chart. Not specifically to look at any of the details, but what this is my tracking record of finishes since 1960. I'm an old guy. I've been doing lighting for a long time, and I've been looking at finishes since 1960. So along here on the left, we've got all the different finishes and colorations, and of course the years going across. The thing I want you to note is not so much necessarily where finishes start and stop, but I want you to notice that they all seem to stop. Probably the most dominant finish that we had in the last 60 years of my looking at this is polished brass. But you can see that polished brass did in fact end. All of the hot colors popular in the 60s ended. Sadly, heritage avocado and harvest gold did in fact end. So the point here is not to dwell on the past, but to remind you that all finishes do end, and the finish that now appears to be coming to a close is oil rub bronze. Now I want to make sure that it's very clear. When I say that it's coming to a close, right now it still does have a substantial amount of sales. So this is coming from a very high in sales. It will continue to sell for a number of years, but keep in mind that right at this point it has reached the peak of its use. So every design, every style has an arc. It reaches peak popularity and then starts on the downhill slide. You have probably noticed this in plumbing. So plumbing, I would say if you went back about 3 years ago, you would see an extremely heavy use of oil rub bronze in plumbing. And at the recent plumbing shows that I've attended, there is virtually no oil rub bronze being shown in the display cases. So with that, what's coming up next? Now, people always assume that there's going to be a one-for-one trade-off in a lot of these colors, and that's not necessarily the case, and that is not going to be the case with oil rub bronze. But there are some things that are coming around and that are making a pretty substantial difference. The first one is a natural brass. So what happens with the natural brass is that the metal is oxidized, and an oxidization is a very dark brown kind of a matte coloration, chemical finish that goes over the top of a piece of metal. And then that oxidization is relieved. Now, if you were around in the 80s and the 90s, you probably remember a color called antique brass. This was done in a very similar process, but the antique brass left a substantially larger amount of that dark brown oxidization on the finish. With the natural brass, virtually all of it is being released and removed, and it leaves this very rich golden tone, has kind of a satin finish. This works in a number of different styles, both contemporary as well as traditional. Here you see a number of designs. A lot of these are kind of reminiscent of mid-century modern. Guess why this works really well with mid-century modern? because during that era, during the 60s era, we had a finish called satin brass. And satin brass is very, very close, not the same, but very, very close to the natural brass we're seeing now. So when you see these mid-century modern pieces in this coloration, it does make a fair amount of aesthetic sense. The next color that you should be keeping conscious of and paying attention to is what Kistler calls sterling gold. There are other manufacturers who are using a very similar color, but the baseline is that this is a semi-flat silver topped with a gold. So basically the gold is dabbled over this semi-flat silver. The great thing about this style, about this finish, is that it actually is somewhat of a chameleon. If you put it in a room that is substantially warmer, it's got a lot of golds and maybe a lot of earth tones, you're going to see that the gold is going to come to the top. It's going to be much more noticeable. However, if you drop this into the room where there's a lot of nickel or there's a lot of silver, that silver is actually going to start to come to prominence. So this is kind of really interesting. This is a very rich coloration. It does, however, find its way into more traditional pieces. So you can see here is a collection of very traditional, or in some cases transitional designs, and it really works well with that. Does a nice job, dances really well with crystal and beading that you might find on pieces. The third finish, and this one seems to have come out of nowhere, and it is just a dynamo finish now. It is kind of taking everything by storm. Is black. It's typically going to be a matte black. It's oftentimes paired with another color. It is working well in contemporary as well as traditional. This finish is really on fire right now. If you are considering something, a change, start looking at this matte black finish and find something where it's got some nice color that's going to balance with some of the other aspects of the interior you're working with. So with the black, as I said here, in this chandelier, it's mixed with a very white glass, so you have a pretty a very basic piece. Here's a little bit more contemporary, even kind of leaning toward a mid-century modern, where the black is mixed with that mesh and a polished nickel. It's a beautiful finish combination. Here the black is mixed with a faux wood finish. So again, really, really hot. This is probably the most potent finish and powerful finish that you're seeing right now in the marketplace. Okay, so as I indicated earlier, I've been following finish trends. I've also been following style trends, and again, this is a collection of a number of different styles over here on the left, and 1960 through this chart actually is open to 2022. I'm trying to do some predictions for the future. But again, styles do have an ebb and flow. They come, they go, they come back, they leave. If you want to just take a look at this mid-century modern was popular in the mid-century. What a surprise there. It came back in the late 80s, and now we're seeing it again over here. So what's happening with styles? There's a couple things that I think are really important for you to pay attention to with regard to style. We have had a vintage industrial. This little cart, that table cart that's pictured here, is a very hardcore vintage industrial. We've kind of hit that. Now what you're seeing is a sort of a relaxation of those hard edge industrials. You're seeing a softening of those. And then contemporary, we've kind of hit the end of the most stark contemporary, and now you're seeing a little bit of softening of those hard contemporary. So let's go through and let me help you understand this. So here is a product that you may recognize. Obviously vintage industrial, you can see the exposed bolts. It's got a very heavily textured black finish, rough hewn wood here, and glass that has the seated air pockets in it. And what you're seeing now is a change. So now we're going to move, and simply by changing the metal finish. So we've moved from this heavy textured black to a classic pewter finish, and taking the wood from this rough piece to a grayer tone. We've now softened this vintage industrial. We've made it a little bit cleaner, a little bit less industrial, still exposed hardware. You can see here on the ends and around the wood base, but we've softened up this look. Let me give you another example. This piece right here actually was something that you would have found in a factory at the turn of the century. This metal cage was designed to protect an incandescent light bulb from all the things that might be flying through a factory or may break light bulbs in a factory. So this was a very functional piece. But what we're seeing now is a softening of this. Now, here is an artist's rendition of what that cage is. You would have never seen this this pentagon-shaped frame with exposed solder in a factory in 1907. It just simply would not have been there. So this is a softened version of a very real industrial piece. Here, one more example. This black pipe has been a very popular aspect, and if you're not familiar with the term black pipe, it's basically gas pipe. Gas pipe is often called in the trade black pipe. But the pipe actually has fittings. There's threads on the side of the rod. They are oftentimes a company name stamped in the fittings. So this is where we started with a lot of the vintage industrial, but now it's been softened just a little bit. So rather than having this hard collared edge fitting here, it's now a simple, clean, turned line. You still have these vintage exposed socket covers, but you don't have a lot of those hard edges. So this one, it's kind of a two-tone finish where we have the natural brass here and the matte black. So this is bringing in two of those other trends that I shared with you a few slides ago, that vintage industrial trend and the flat black trend here. But it's again softened. Okay, so on the contemporary side, I said we were trying to we would glamorize it just a touch. So here we have a total collection of geometric shapes, which are really indicative of that hard contemporary design. And now what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and soften that. In this case, we have some of these glass rods that just go ahead and break that light up. A little bit softer than it was in the past. Here's a couple of really good examples. So here we have a chandelier, and rather than simply having this straight candle cover here, we've added a piece of irregularly polished crystal on the end. So we're going to add that touch of glamour. This wall sconce here on the right, if we were to do this about 3-4 years ago, this little faceted bauble in the intersection would simply not have been there. And this frame right here is also another good example. 5 years ago, this would have simply been a metal frame. Now there is a cube at the intersection of each of the corners to soften that hard contemporary product. All right, the next trend is unusual placement. There are some basic understanding of where product is expected to go, but that's not necessarily written in stone. There is no reason why we can't use multiple chandeliers. You can see this is a very elegant dining room. We could have certainly used a very large chandelier in this space, but rather than doing so, what this designer elected to do was add two slightly smaller chandeliers to the space and create a really interesting impact. Now, it does not have to result in additional cost, because rather than doing one expensive chandelier, you could do two very well-priced pendants and end up being as interesting. And you can see in this case, a very traditional design and still have two traditional pendants over that. So you can save money and you can make these changes in a contemporary or a traditional setting. Taller ceilings actually require taller fixtures. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of space between the tabletop and the ceiling, and especially you can see that this is, you know, something of a 15, 20-foot ceiling height. This chandelier that's used in this image is probably around a 5-foot chandelier. In this case, it's a cathedral ceiling over this dining room, so they've used about a 4, maybe 4.5-foot tall pendant over that table. On the other side of the spectrum, we are seeing, in general, smaller dining rooms. We're seeing smaller dining rooms because the dining room is not used as often or as prevalent as it had been in the past. However, we are still seeing those taller ceiling heights. So what you have is a smaller square footage, but you have a taller room. So it's conceivable that you would have a 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot tall cube of a dining room. So what does that mean? That means that your chandelier now is going to have to be a tighter diameter, and the height of the chandelier is going to have to be a little bit taller. So again, some of those proportions that were available and were used with lighting manufacturers for years and years and years and years and years are disappearing. Here's again another sconce that gets somewhere close to around 20 inches because of these extended ceiling heights. In a bedroom, you don't have to have a bed lamp next to on each of the end tables. Think about using pendants instead. These can be individually switched, just like the lamps are individually switched. They'd go on the wall right behind it, and it then frees up the bed, the table or the bedstand for much more useful things like an alarm clock and a picture of the loved ones. Hallways also don't necessarily need to be lit with those ceiling fixtures. Think about the step and aisle lighting that is popular. And those of you who happen to do designs for senior living, this is actually a wonderful way to do senior lighting because this is a non-glare situation. Now this particular piece is actually a little bit more glary, but there are a number of these that have shields on them that would have substantially less glare. This is a really good solution because the problem that most seniors have is understanding where the floor, where steps are, where things might be in the hallway. So if they happen to have a cat and he might be sitting here over in the middle of the hallway, to avoid stepping on it, these hall lights, these step and aisle lights that are shooting light across the floor are really, really effective. Think about multiple pendants. So rather than having a 2-story or a three-tier single pendant in these big double-story foyers, a couple of inexpensive pendants mounted in a very interesting artistic way can be a real nice entry to a home. Also, however, disappearing are those double-story foyers. So you might need to look at different options or different solutions to those 1.5-story or maybe those 12-foot foyer entries because those 3-tier chandeliers that we used in the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s just won't work anymore in some of those applications. So look at hanging a chandelier very tight up to the ceiling like this. Look at interesting semi-flush pieces. Those can be a really nice way to add some interest to a non-2-story foyer. Think about multiple sconces. So you can see in this mission style over here on the left, they have some really interesting sconces here, and then a small semi-flush in the middle. In this particular design, while it's old, they simply put a sconce around the full perimeter. And I'm assuming that where the photographer was standing, there would be some sconces on the wall as there. So rather than a single piece in the middle, you can put 4, 6, 8 sconces as they go around the perimeter of the room. Powder room can be a really interesting place to add Very interesting lighting. So the powder room here is, you can see that because they're small, you can add some of these more expensive materials. So this material on the wall here is actually quite expensive. But if you're only buying 4 square feet of it, it can be an affordable option that can work well. So think about some of those interesting feature pendants that might work in a space. In this case, you can see that this panel of bamboo is backlit with LED, and there are 2 interesting sconces on each side here. Everything's off center, and the light is just a large or oversized pendant off a size. Don't have to worry too much about about customer use. Typically, these are guest spaces, so your neighbors or friends who might be using the powder room will go in, take a look in the mirror, make sure that they don't have any broccoli stuck in their teeth, and then get out of that room. So it's not going to be that workhorse of a space, which allows for a lot of freer options in design. The mini pendant concept has gone. It's disappeared. It really is not of any value anymore because of a couple things. Because of the size of the islands that we're putting into homes, and because of the increased ceiling heights. So taller pendants are going to be needed in these larger kitchens, especially the larger kitchens with the taller ceiling heights. Larger pendants are necessary if, in fact, you're going to have a very large island. But also there are other options. Think about clusters. So you can take a small cluster pendant like you see here and put a couple of those over the table. Here's a neat idea. So this is a pantry to the left, and it's just an open door, but what they did is they put an outdoor lighting fixture inside the house over the pantry. I would assume that's got to be illegal, right? No, it's not. You can bring an outdoor fixture inside. You can't bring an indoor fixture outside. So this would be perfectly acceptable from an electrical standpoint, but it also is an interesting way to add a bit of interest into this kitchen. So here's a room that I'm sure someone was arrested for doing. They've taken the chandelier and they put the chandelier over the island. They took the island light and they put it over the dining room table, and then they put a mini pendant over the sink. Clearly this is in violation of every design rule ever written. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You want to violate some of these rules because it's going to work. This linear pendant works really well over an elongated dining room table. This chandelier works pretty nice over this island. So think about those alternate placements. You don't have to have a ceiling filled with recessed cans. It is not necessary. We have been doing it for a long period of time, but think about some semi-flush options. You can see that this semi-flush ceiling piece here really fits into the aesthetics of this much more contemporary kitchen, and can add a substantial amount of light, and especially with these 9-foot ceilings that we have here, it actually brings the light closer to the room and makes them much more viable. And of course, this room is dressed with some very nice accent lightings under a toe kick at the shelving over here, and then of course under cabinet lighting under the shelves. Many pendants are finding their way into bathrooms. So everyone knows that the best way to light a bathroom mirror is one light on each side of the mirror. The light across the top of the mirror is not really the most effective way. So whether or not the electrician puts a electric box on the wall, or if they put it on the ceiling, they still have 2 outlet boxes. And a mini pendant can do a really nice job for that. It also helps if you have a full wall of mirrors. So imagine if this wall were a full mirror, you wouldn't have to try and drill holes through the mirror. You can simply put the outlet box on the ceiling, make sure that they're correctly centered they're correctly centered at each bowl or each sink, and it can be a really nice way to add some variety to a bathroom. Accent lights in the bathroom can be very effective. You can see here that there's a color changing RGB light that's dressing this particular tub. Could have put some light underneath the vanity here, which would have made it for an easy way to get in and out of that bathroom in the middle of the night. So again, think about those alternate locations. Okay, we have a collection of colors that are impacting lighting. So for years and years and years, the exterior materials used in a house were brown, or they're brown tones, brass tones. That shift has been very slow, but it has been somewhat deliberate. And they are now switching to more of a dominance of a gray colored stone, a dove gray siding, maybe a little bit more white on the exteriors as opposed to a beige. And with that change, we have seen more of a demand for a black or a gray based exterior. So in this case, you see that this is a matte black lantern in a pretty recognizable style. Here, this is more of a rough gray textured type of exterior. Again, both of those look really good with the new exterior materials that are on homes. The second trend is beige is back. So if you're looking at trend forward furniture, and I'm not talking about common priced furniture at this point, but I'm talking about some of those trend forward. For the last 5-7 years, they have been using a gray neutral. But an interesting thing is happening in those high-end furniture lines. They are bringing more and more and more beige back. And we're going to have some need for lighting that's going to be commensurate with this return to beige. And interestingly enough, these finishes that I just talked to you about, the sterling gold over here on the left, the natural brass over here on the right, these look really nice with that beige and those beige neutrals. The trend for white. So chrome, polished brass, they have been the go-to finish for contemporary pieces. However, there is some emerging interest in white. And there have been interesting increases shown in online sales for white. So it's kind of an interesting thing. My take is that consumers are going to brick and mortar stores, perhaps not finding things that are white, and the only way that they can get the white product that they need is to go to an online source and purchasing it there. So you'll see a number of contemporary white pieces that are now littering the marketplace. And that's a good thing, because that polished nickel and chrome has been around for a pretty long time. So it'll be interesting to see where this white goes. Now, I've talked to you in some pretty specific nationally, but there is some regionality that we should just quickly, I'm not sure that I know where all of you are from, but there are some things that maybe we need to also mention. So the oil rub bronze it does in fact have a fair amount of staying power. So we're seeing a resistance to change in Texas. I hate to use the term red state versus blue state, but if you kind of look at this red state, blue state map, to some extent there is some resistance, if you will, to moving away from the oil rub bronze in these red state areas. Now, of course, that's just a general term. And demographically, interestingly enough, the Gen X buyers are not so interested in relieving their grasp on oil rub bronze. So it's kind of an interesting thing when I hear that this Gen X seems to still want this oil rub bronze. The gray exterior, the exception there is based on architecture. So if you happen to be in the southwest of the United States, pockets of Florida, there is kind of a dominant design style where there's a stucco architecture and the red tile roof. That is still a style that is going to demand those brass bronze colorations on the exterior. So that's not going to disappear here. The black and gray are really not going to do justice on this style of architecture. So if you happen to be in those areas, you're likely to see a continuation of those bronze finishes. Lighting fixture manufacturers are not going to break away from those bronze because these are very these are growth areas in the United States. So you will still continue to see bronze being added into the line, but alongside those additional black and gray pieces. White is really very trendy. Demographically, we're looking at the boomers who are leaving their McMansions and moving to a more urban environment, and the millennials who are just simply looking for something completely different. Be pretty cautious with this trend to white. It is a pretty small segment of the marketplace at this point, but something that you should keep ahead. Contemporary glamour. This is kind of an interesting thing as well. It does appear to have some urban market influence, higher priced homes, higher priced products. It's going after that refined Gen X buyer and a select boomer. So the boomers had for years and years and years and years used a much more traditional design in their living environment. And they are, again, like I said before, they are moving away, perhaps going to a more urban environment and saying, I don't want anything that I had before. I'm going to have something completely different. So that's how they're kind of coming to this glamour contemporary, if you will. Two-story foyers are in fact disappearing, but they are holding steady in a couple areas. Specifically in Texas, they're disappearing quickly in the Southwest and Florida, but it's important to remember that in many cases they are staying in those higher end homes. So people who are going to their third or their fourth home, or building the third and fourth home, and it's 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. They will, in fact, bring that two-story entryway into those spaces and still demand that very large entryway. But the entry-level price homes, they are disappearing pretty quickly. Okay, so those are the aesthetic trends that I'm looking at. The next group is the technology changes. So essentially centered around LED, but let's go ahead and jump into those. So LED is changing the very core design that you see with lighting. If you clench your fist, that's about the size of an incandescent, typical 60-watt light bulb. That means all designers had to figure out how to cover that 60-watt light bulb in order to make an effective design. An LED is about a quarter the size of your baby fingernails. So now, all of a sudden, it can change the aesthetics of a lighting product. So it's not a situation where we're simply taking our old friend, the 60-watt light bulb, and we're replacing it with an LED-based light bulb. You're going to still use these, and you're going to have a couple of lighting fixtures in your garage or maybe your laundry room that you're just simply not going to change. It's pretty simple to just go ahead and buy one of these guys and replace it. But it's going to be closer to this. So here we have kind of a typical chandelier. It's got a center column, a bunch of arms centered around that, and we're moving to this. This is Zaha Hadid's interpretation of a chandelier. If you don't know Zaha Hadid, she unfortunately passed away a couple of months ago. But this is what she envisioned as a chandelier. She was a remarkably inventive and creative architect, and she felt that she wanted to make a chandelier look like this. Now, it would be impossible to light this particular chandelier with anything other than LED. But not only did she envision this, she envisioned this. She felt that color was actually going to be a part of the design as well. So during the day, it can put, or during a normal use, it can be a white light. But if she happened to have a party, she could turn it into a somewhat violet light. So you're seeing shapes that had previously been impossible. This is a chandelier that is about the size of a bicycle tire. So this is about the diameter of a bicycle tire, the rim on the inside. It would be impossible to put incandescent light bulbs inside this. Here's an interesting piece as well. See, this is about a 1/4 inch thick piece of metal. The LED runs along that band of metal underneath and lights these plastic printed panels below. Again, totally impossible with an incandescent light source. Those of you who have been around the business for a while know what this is. This is what a recessed can looks like before the drywall is put on the ceiling. That a couple of years ago was switched to this, so this screws into that, and now we have these LED downlets that are surface mounted. So rather than providing this 1.5 pounds of steel, all fabricated, stamped, wired, we're now going to have this little 6 and even some smaller than that at 4-inch disc of LED that's going to do essentially the same job. If you ever used architectural detail lighting in the past, this is a festoon lamp. It was a very ugly, cumbersome, spotty light source, but it's all we had. And that has been replaced with LED tape. If you haven't used LED tape yet, seek out a supplier that has that. Have them give you an explanation of it. It is a fabulous light source. And that allows for these interesting pieces of architectural lighting. So you can see this cove here has been lit from the back. This drop ceiling or tray ceiling has been lit from behind. This really beautiful coffered ceiling has been lit in all of that nice millwork. Here's a product that is the thickness of drywall. So basically, you can create any kind of design that you'd like on a wall, on a ceiling, or a combination of both, like you see here on the left, and put the drywall around it, mud over the top, and it becomes a little interesting detail. Okay, color is now going to become an important part as we get deeper and deeper and deeper into LED. Color can actually help accentuate the design that you're going to use lighting in. So let me share some information with you on that. Right now, there are some commonly available LED colors: 2700, 3000, and there's some bluer ones as well. I've got an image here of a cabinet that is lit. The three layers are lit in different colors. So the first bank here is lit in 2700, 3000 in the middle, and then 4000 at the end. So what happens, and what I hope you can see here, is that the color will actually make a difference with the environment. So you're going to want to use a 2700 Kelvin where you have a warm room, where you have beige neutrals, where there's a lot of wood, golds, orange, yellows, earth tones, and that is going to allow those colors then to become much more interesting and much more exciting. Here's the same cabinet. I want you to look now in the middle, because this middle is lit with 3000. So if you have something that's white or black, you're going to want to use 3000, because you can see here that this cabinet actually is white when it's lit with 3000. When it's lit with 2700, it has kind of a yellowy coloration to the back. So this is going to allow that color to come to dominance. So look what the 3000 does to the blue plate here compared to the blue plate over on the 2700. It really has a much nicer color. So cool rooms, gray neutrals, black and white, purple, greens, blues, all of those are going to look better under a 3000. So it's not a one-for-one. We can't just simply say we're going to take our current incandescent, we're going to replace everything with 2700 or everything with 3000. We now have the ability to select a color that's going to work better with the item that we're going to design. And finally, 3000 over 3000, typically going to be 4000. That's what you're most likely going to see in the available. Where am I going to use that? In a residence, I would say that you are generally not going to use something this blue. 4000 is typically going to be for commercial applications. However, if you do have a client or a customer who's has a crystal collection or a sterling collection, this additional blue is actually going to do a real nice job lighting that. Okay, so let's jump outside. I want you to see what happens with these colors outside. So here we have a nice stone wall on the left and a beautiful cedar siding on the right, lit with this 2700. So it does a real nice job with that. The stone looks very comfortable. The cedar siding looks really rich. All right, now I want you to stare at the screen. I'm going to advance this to 3000. I want you to see what happens to this very same scene when we move from 2700 to 3000. Okay, so hopefully you see what happens there. So now all of a sudden the stone is not quite as comfortable as it was, and that cedar siding has really lost its warmth, really lost its inviting. But who noticed what the flowers did? Did you notice the flowers? The flowers are actually loving this 3000 coloration. So if you didn't notice that, I'm gonna step back one. I want you to look just at the flowers now, because I want you to see what happens with the yellower light. Okay, so you see that? The flowers here kind of dull, unexcited, but now let's move forward. And you can see now at 3000, now they're bright, vibrant, and the greens are coming out. All right, again, stare at the screen, and I'm going to move up to 4000. Okay, so now, what do we have with 4000 on the stone? The stone just simply looks like it's an industrial barrier. Looks like it's something from Orange is the New Black. It's kind of a penitentiary look. And the cedar siding has just lost all of its warmth, almost even looks as though it was set outside in salt air for too long. But again, did you notice the flowers? The flowers are absolutely loving this additional blue. There are a number of landscape lighting designers who will intentionally select a bluer color for things like an evergreen tree or spruce, because adding that touch of blue makes the color of those plants just absolutely come alive. So the key here is that you're going to have a color, you want to select the color that's going to work best. Dim to warm bulbs, you're going to notice as well. So if you were to do a standard LED light bulb dimming, you're not going to have them go from dim to warm. So across the bottom, you're going to see here that if you reduce it by 10%, 50%, 80%, you don't add any of that orange that we associate with dimming incandescent lights. Now there are dim to warm light bulbs that you can find on the market, where they start adding a little bit more of that orange that we have come to expect from dimmed incandescent. You're also going to notice some human-centric lighting. But basically, human-centric lighting is lighting that is actually going to work completely with all of the requirements that we have in life. So yes, we want that energy saving, sustainability, but it's going to also work better with our circadian rhythm. It's going to understand what our moods are. It will give us better visual acuity. We'll be able to see better, and it's going to improve our productivity. So you're going to hear this term, or this term is going to start coming up, human-centric lighting. It's going to mean a number of different things. Here's a Philips Hue light bulb. There's also available from Leafex. These are lights that are going to help light us, light our spaces in accordance with the demands of the circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm, in short, wants to have blue light during the day and orange or reddish light at night. And when that happens, our body functions substantially better. If we reverse that, that's when we have some problems with maintaining a good circadian rhythm and good melatonin production and consumption. With that, there's a company called F-Lux that will actually color the background of your computer. So if you're somebody who needs to jump on that computer 3 minutes before you close your eyes at night, you probably want to download this F-Lux. The new iPhones have this already installed, but basically what it does is it takes that bluish tint and it warms it up as it goes through the day. So this is something that is absolutely going to be an important aspect. A lot of study on the color of light in the last couple of years, and there's going to be some interesting research findings over the next couple of years, to the point where it almost might be a demand from consumers that they have circadian-based lighting. So let's talk about using LED effectively. Right now, we're probably aware that LED is a touch more expensive. It's continuing to go down in price, but it still remains a little bit more expensive. So because of that, we want to make sure that we choose our LED wisely. Where am I going to choose? What rooms am I going to use? Where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck if I decide to invest in LED? The Department of Energy has done some wonderful studies. This is one of them. They've actually been doing a lot of studies on LED, and what they're doing is they're telling us that how many light bulbs there are, and they tell us how often we use our lighting. Here's a couple of interesting things. You can see the number one use of lighting is our exterior light. We use it for more hours and we consume more wattage. Inside the house is the kitchen. So where am I least likely to save money if I want to go to an LED? Well, I'm not going to save any money in the closets, the foyer, the dining room, the hallway. If you don't turn the light on, or you don't turn it on very often, you're really not going to save money on energy. So there's not a lot of value in looking or seeking out a dining room chandelier that's LED if in fact you never turn it on. Now if you want it for aesthetic reasons, that's a completely different thing. But if you're trying to save money, you're not going to save money in the hallway or the garage. Where am I going to save money? I'm going to save money in the kitchen. We talked about the outdoor, outside. Inside the house, kitchen is number one. So if you have a finite amount of money, or your client has a finite amount of money, have them spend that money in the kitchen, then the living room and the bathroom. And then also understand where that customer uses their light. My wife has to have the back light, hallway light on all night. And if you want to guess which lighting fixture in my house was the first one I switched to LED, it was that back hallway light, because that's just the way we happen to use lighting in our house. So figure out where those changes, where those quirks are in the particular family, and make those changes. And finally, LED is inevitable. We are becoming accustomed to LED. It continues to get better, continues to get less expensive. We, however, do need to lose our incandescent mentality. The Department of Energy tells us that we are going to have improved efficacy. So here we are in 2017. We still have another 8 years before the efficacy starts plateauing. So we're going to see an additional efficacy over the next 8 years. Some people are saying it's actually going to go a little bit higher than this. The number that other folks are talking about is about 225. The expectation is by 2030, 72% of the lighting in residence is going to be LEDs. So this is going to be a rapid turnover. Life expectancy, again, here we are in 2017, about 2025, 2024. So we have about maybe another 6 or 7 years. that the life expectancy is going to continue to grow. And if you look at the general overall use of light bulbs, so we're over here someplace, you can see there's a very small amount of LED being used. By 2030, you can see it is going to be a very, very substantial amount of lighting. So yeah, here's our indicators. You can see how little it is. 2020, it's going to be substantial growth. 25, almost half and half. And then pricing is going to continue to go down. So this chart is a little skewed that the Department of Energy has provided. You can see here's 10 and here's 100 and there's 1,000. But in 2010, they were saying that it was at $190 per kilolumen, and they expect by 2030 it to go down to $11 per kilolumen for luminaires. Light bulbs are obviously going to be a little bit less than that. Take a look at the real cost. We're getting pretty close to the end, so I want to try to get through as much of this as I can. Just want to compare 6 LED versus 6 old xenon. Here's our xenon installation consuming 54 watts. We're going to pay $711 for the actual lighting fixtures. Now we need some cables and wire modules, and we need some light bulbs. But you can see over here with the LED, we're going to spend a little bit more for the LED actual fixtures. Same price for the cables and the wire modules. However, we're not going to spend any money for replacement light bulbs. Now, if we look at these things side by side, our LED is going to consume 324 watts, and our xenon is going to consume 324 watts. The LED is going to consume 60 watts. So overall, we're going to spend $1,600, over $1,600 for electricity on the xenon system, and only $303 for the LED. Now, some people are having a hard time understanding what 40,000 hours does. So let me give you this one other figure. So imagine you're going to use your under cabinet lighting for 6 hours a day for 1 year. The xenon system is going to cost you almost $90 to run for 1 year. The LED system is going to cost $16.62. So you're going to have a yearly savings of $73.13 based on national average of 12.65 and based on the idea that the cost of electricity is not going down. I don't know anybody who believes that it's going to go down, but if you do, go ahead and email me. I'd like to put you on record as being the first person that thinks you're going to have a reduction in cost of electricity. Anyway, if you look at your total life cost, yes, you will pay more money for the LED product, but you're going to save money on replacement light bulbs. You're going to save money on electricity. This life saving is $1,688. We need to start thinking about a longer term use for our lighting. We've got this incandescent mentality, and we think about it in terms of incandescence, but we're moving from something that's going to cost a small amount of money now, but requires constant maintenance and requires expensive cost of operation, to something that's going to be a little bit more expensive up front, but it's going to have no maintenance and a lower cost of operation. Give you another example, this landscape lighting job here for this particular house. The old incandescent system was going to cost $17,000 for the 40,000 hours. The LED system, $11,000. This is a $6,084 savings. This is one of the reasons why LED has almost overtaken completely the landscape lighting line. LED is forcing us to rethink lighting. Right now, we currently buy lighting like a furniture store. Oh, this is pretty, matches the interior, looks nice. And we're going to be moving toward this appliance store concept. This appliance store concept basically is, I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to ask some serious questions in an appliance store. What kind of a warranty am I going to get? How is this going to perform? So we're going to ask slightly different questions. We've made this change before. In the past, we may have repaired our own tube-based television, but no one here is willing to start thinking about how you might poke around the backside of a flat screen. It simply doesn't happen any longer. This is a transition we've made before, and this new one will come very quickly. So with that, recap, I talked to you about taller. I talked to you about oil rub bronze. We talked about softening and glamorizing, alternate placement, and I gave you some interesting ideas on some color changes. In the technology group, we talked about the shape of LED lighting. We talked about the color of LED. It's going to be very important. Use it effectively. Use LED effectively because you're going to get the most bang for your buck that way. And it is inevitable. If you have not yet embraced LED, it's time to do so. With that, I know we are right at 1 hour right now, but if I'll turn this back over to the folks at NY and see if any questions have popped up.
None that I can see. I did have one question from a register. She said, LED for recessed lighting, commercial and residential. How can we as designers guarantee the correct lighting level and color?
Designing LED to the correct, designing any kind of recessed can to the correct levels actually requires some math. I would urge you to research two things. There's a book called Kitchen and Bath Lighting Made Easy. Now I know that it's a commercial application, but if you use the concepts in this Kitchen and Bath Lighting Made Easy, you can apply those to commercial spaces. There is a formula. There is also, however, a program that particular author has created, obviously with a computer programmer. It's called LightCalc, LIGHTCALC. It's a program that you can buy. It's not horribly expensive, and what you do is you add things into that area, such as size of the room, color of the furnishings, beam angles, whatever. Once you place all of this data, it will recommend spacing. It will recommend necessary candle power, and then you simply need to take those recommendations and go to your supplier, such as New York here, and ask them to help you find those products with the correct specifications. So that it's not a rule of thumb type situation. It does require some calculation.
Okay, so we have another one. It is, what type of trends are you seeing in usage tracking within new fixtures?
Usage, well, I think what has happened over the years, and it's I suspect you will see this repeated in other industries, trends are changing a little bit quicker than they had in the past. So we are seeing a shifting in the length of time that a style or a color is relevant. As far, and I'm not sure that I know exactly what you're asking, but as far as quantity of lighting in a space, there is now substantially more lighting than was in a home as little as 10 years ago. A typical kitchen 10 years ago may have had a single fluorescent 2x4 troffer or a drop-down fluorescent big huge piece in the middle of the kitchen. Maybe there was some under cabinet lighting. Now in a very typical kitchen, you're going to have a grid of recessed fixtures along with some under cabinet lighting, some artistic or decorative pieces such as mini pendants or an island light, and then very often you're going to have some accent lighting, typically provided by that LED tape above the cabinets, at the toe kick, inside cabinets. So the quantity of lighting that's being used is radically increased. It doesn't mean that we're using more electricity. You know, we're using them selectively, but we're using more lighting.
So the customer or the registrant said, I was more referring to data tracking, kilowatt per fixture, proximity usage, etc.
Oh, okay. So, probably the best thing for you to take a look at. I can give you this one piece of information. In 2008, lighting represented 14% of a typical homeowner's electric bill. In 2014, which is the last time the DOE did this research, it slipped down to 11%. Um, if you were to go back to 2001, it was at 8%. So it went from 8% to 14%, then down to 11%. Now, the reason it went from 8% to 14%, that's 2001 to 2008, is because virtually all of the other industries that consume electricity in the home were substantially less efficient. Now, they became more efficient up into that 2008, but between 2008 and 2014, a lot of that is actually being associated with um, with the switch to more incandescent, more non-incandescent product. Initially, it was CFLs. CFLs at their peak were about 30% of use in a home. Um, and that one chart that I did have in this presentation indicated that they know how many light bulbs are in America. I don't know that I wanted that job to have counted them all, but they do know how many were in America, and they do know that in a residence, the average wattage consumption is at, right now in 2012, 49 watts, 49 point something, but you can go back and take a look at that when you get a copy of this. So maybe that's where you're at.
Okay, so one more question, just because we're
Sure.
crunched for time. Recommendation of under-counter LED supplier manufacturer to keep less reflection off of granite and stone.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing about granite and stone. Granite and stone is a reflective surface, so it doesn't have anything to do with LED. If you were to put a fluorescent tube under there, you're still going to get a reflection. Um, there's no way to avoid that. Frankly, if you put a can opener underneath you can actually see the can opener in the reflective surface of the granite. So what you're actually asking is that a reflective surface doesn't reflect, which really doesn't really work. That just doesn't happen. What I would take a look at is so with that understanding that you are going to see a reflection, if what you're objecting to are the dots of LED as opposed to the dots of xenon, or as opposed to the sliver of fluorescent tube, take a look at some of the companies that are using a more a diffuser that has a quick breakup of light. So there are new materials that are being used now that actually take that dot of light and refract it or break it much quicker than in the past. So there are things embedded inside that plastic diffuser that help break up that dot of light much faster. So you might want to take a look at some of those manufacturers that are using that type of material.
Okay, perfect.